Your Superior Self, Episode 41.
If you don't jump ship, how is your life going to be? In 40 years from now, looking back, are you going to regret it? Because you honestly, again, it's cliche, but you got one shot at this. You have one shot at life. And when you're 70 and you're 80 and you're not able to do the things that you wish you would have tried to do, you are going to regret it. And have a contingency plan. Don't be crazy. Don't be irresponsible. But think, what's the upside if I jump ship right now? The upside is that I put my passion and my hard work into it and I make this work and I achieve what very few people in the history of the world have been able to do, which is pursue your passion on a daily basis.
Welcome to Your Superior Self podcast. I am Trey Downs, blue-collar worker turned into blue-collar entrepreneur. And each week I will interview inspiring influencers that will help you find your why. Thank you for hanging out with me today, and let's get after it. Hey, what's up, guys? Real quick, I want to take a moment and talk about Alan Stein Jr.'s new book called Raise Your Game. Alan Stein Jr. is an amazing author and former Your Superior Self guest, by the way. Alan is a big supporter of what I'm trying to do with the podcast, and in his book, Raise Your Game, he shares secrets and principles of world-class performers that will help you elevate your game and achieve greater success. Raise Your Game will help you drill down on your answers to these vital questions like, what sacrifices do I need to make? What skills do I need to acquire? Whose help would I benefit from? What challenges should I expect? And what habits do I need to change? This book will be the initial spark to raising your game in every area of your life. Just to give you an idea of how impactful this book is, here are what people are saying. Kevin Durant, Golden State Warrior, NBA superstar and champion, says, quote, Alan played a huge role in my development on and off the court, and in his guidance helped me to get to where I am today. This book is a must-read, end quote. John Gordon, best-selling author of Training Camp and The Carpenter, said, quote, Alan shares what it takes to take your game to the next level. Raise Your Game provides tools, concepts, and strategies you can utilize today to enhance your influence and make an immediate impact on your team, culture, and organization, end quote. Do yourself a favor and pre-order Raise Your Game by Alan Stein Jr. on Amazon today. For more information about Alan Stein or the book, please visit raiseyourgamebook.com. If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind. Go all the way. It could mean not eating for 3 or 4 days. It could mean freezing on a park bench. It could mean jail. It could mean derision, mockery, isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you'll do it despite rejection and the worst odds, and it will be better than anything else you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There is no other feeling like that. You will be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it all the way. All the way. You will ride life straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is. And that poem is called Roll the Dice by Charles Bukowski. It's my favorite because it reminds me to go all the way. No matter what you're doing in life, no matter what goals that you write down for yourself, go all the way. Because a lot of us don't do that. We take on these projects. We commit to these goals, and then we stop halfway and wonder why we don't ever achieve success. Whatever your definition of success is because you don't go all the way with it. Like, it could take years, it could take months, days to achieve something, some sort of success that you may be looking for. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to put in the work, and that's what he talks about in the poem. You could lose your mind. You could end up on a bench 3 or 4 days without food, trying to achieve your goal. But go all the way, because when you do, it's going to be better than anything you could imagine. I am absolutely fired up about today's guest. His name is Mike Thayer, and he is the author of the children's fictional novel series, The Epic Adventures of the Techno Wizard. The first book in that series, he sent my son Camden. It's called Passage to Avalon, and it's absolutely perfect for him and his imagination. I highly recommend you guys picking a copy up. He signed it and sent a nice little bookmark for my son Camden. He's a great dude. He went from chemical engineer to author. He quit his job. He quit his security blanket of a job with healthcare and benefits and pursued this lifestyle of pursuing your happiness. And this is his story. He's going to come on the show and explain what he went through and why he did it. So without further ado, here is Mike Thayer. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. Today, I am stoked to have on the show Mike Thayer, author, father, husband. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. It's awesome to be on.
So for my listeners who haven't heard of you yet, that's been living under a rock, can you please give us a quick rundown on what you're up to today?
Sure. I'm right now I am writing children's fantasy novels. So I have a book series called The Epic Adventures of the Techno Wizard. I had my first one come out in April of this year. My second one comes out in December, so I'm knee deep in that. And I'm also writing another book called Danny Doubleday. It's about a boy who lives every day twice. He's a fourth grader, so he uses it to cheat on tests and get in trouble. It's kind of like Groundhog Day mixed with Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And I started a podcast called Calling All Nerds, where I talk to everyone who was interested and interesting. And I just quit my career with ExxonMobil, my 10-year career with ExxonMobil, about 2 or 3 months ago. So
Holy
the first
crap.
of 1st of August.
So take me through that. Like, what was that process?
Yeah, so I graduated in chemical engineering from BYU in 2008, and then immediately started going to work for ExxonMobil. So we went down to Texas. That was awesome. We spent 5 years in Texas, and then we spent 3 years in Australia. That was such a cool assignment. I've got 3 little kids. I got married really young. I got married at 21. We started having kids almost immediately. So, I'm 34 and I have an 11-year-old. So I kind of felt like I've been in my mid-30s for 10 years. I feel like if I can be in my mid-30s for 20 years of my life, I'm good, right? From when I'm my early 20s to my mid-40s, if I can stay in sort of my mid-30s. So we went down to Australia, built a gas plant down there. So out in rural Australia, I got to meet incredible people. And then we moved to Billings, Montana in 2016. And I've been in Billings for 2 years. So I've been, went all over the world with Exxon, not just moving, but, I think I've worked in, 5 different continents. I don't know how many plane trips I've taken. So I did the whole big corporate life, working for about the biggest, top dog company you could go for. And there's a lot of things I liked about Exxon. There's a lot of things that, the challenge, the people were incredible. When I came to Billings, things got a bit different. I started to work for a different part of the corporation in a refinery, and it just devoured my life because a refinery has to live and breathe 24/7. It is a producing entity, and when something goes down, it doesn't care whether it's your birthday or whether it's a holiday. So the big turning moment in my life. So I've been writing in the evenings forever. My dad was a creative writing professor at BYU for 54 years. So he taught some of the greats in science fiction and fantasy, even though he didn't really like science fiction and fantasy, which was a whole different story. So I had writing in my blood a little bit. And then, I don't know, it's almost right when I started working for Exxon, I just kind of felt like there was a creative part of me that was, wasn't getting its time in the sun. It wasn't getting exercised enough. So I started writing in the evenings. And even though I wasn't, I didn't go to college. I think my last writing class was AP English my senior year in high school. So It'd been a while since I'd been formally trained in writing, but
A little rusty.
telling story, yeah, to say the least. So I just, I watched online classes. I would write in the evenings. I would read books. I kind of gave myself like a bachelor's degree in creative writing, sort of, and wrote this huge monster book. It took me 7 years to write it, 200,000 words. I revised it a bunch of times. I sent it out to agents. I got it edited, and it will never see the light of day. So that was just the cost of cutting my teeth in the literary world. And then, so that was what I was doing in the evenings. And then even when I came here to Billings, the harder life got during the day, the more hours I spent at the office, the more hours I would write at night. Mm-hmm. And the weird kind of analogy I give people, are you familiar with the Count of Monte Cristo at all?
Yes.
So this is the analogy that has guided my life for the last, half a decade, which is I would come home from work and I would, say to my wife, like, I took my beatings today, so now I have to go scrape my handful of dirt. And, I would write like 700 words a night, which is like 2 pages, or 300 words a night. And I would just motion to her, like with my hand with a scraping noise, like here's my handful of dirt for the day. And I was not going to take my beatings during the day without going home and scraping that dirt. And I was digging somewhere. I don't know where I was digging to, just like, in the book and in the movie. He doesn't know where he's digging to freedom. He doesn't know where he's digging to in the guard shack, or if he's digging to someone else's cell or just a more comfortable place in Chateau d'If. But I knew I was digging. I was digging somewhere. So it was almost like the creative side of me was rebelling a bit against the day job. And so I came out with a book actually while I was working full time, busiest year of my life, and came out with my first book. And then it all changed last year. It was almost a year ago. Actually, a year ago yesterday was the funeral, but my dad died last year. And he was older. I had an older dad. He got married later in life, but I thought he was going to live till he was 100, and he probably should have. And then he got cancer and had one of those miracle cures, like you're gone, it's terminal, and then it disappeared. And then a different form of cancer came back, and there was no miracle comeback from that one. So it was crazy. It was like never in my life that I had a more clear epiphany than I had just given a talk at his funeral, and I sat down. We were in the church, actually, that I went to my whole youth. And I sat down and I looked at the clock in the church, and I was like, you know what? That is the same clock that was ticking when I was a kid. And when I was in that church as a kid, I couldn't wait. Like, that clock couldn't tick fast enough because I wanted to go home and watch the 49ers. I wanted to go and play. I didn't want to sit in church. And I was looking at that exact same clock, ticking at the exact same speed. And I was like, now I can't get that thing to slow down. And I was like, I am not going to waste one more revolution of that friggin' clock doing anything I don't want to do. And obviously there's parameters to that. I've got 3 kids. You need to take care of them. And so I started sort of mentally putting things into place to do to quit. I always wanted to. The work environment I'm currently in probably fast forwarded that decision by about 5 years, just because it was so overwhelming. We basically buried my dad. I drove home, and the entire refinery had a fire and shut down. So I spent the next 38 out of the next 40 days basically at the refinery, right through Thanksgiving, right in, almost into Christmas. And I just said, life's too short. It's cliche to say, but I was like, life's too short to do something that I, loathe. There's one thing to put up with stuff. And I think looking back, I wouldn't have changed it. I would have gone to get a degree in chemical engineering. I would have gone and seen the world. I would have worked hard. I was able to earn a good deal of money doing that. And it set me up to be able to kind of take this leap of faith. And it gave me a little bit of a financial runway to make it work. Because if you don't get a skill, I don't want to tell people just follow your dreams at all costs. I want to tell people follow your dreams responsibly. That's why I love kind of what you're doing with the whole blue collar thing. Because that's who I've worked with for the last 5 years, right? We built a gas plant in the middle of nowhere. We're at a refinery. So it's welders, electricians, instrument techs, pipe fitters. All these people they've been my life, and I love them. And they have a skill that would be useful in the zombie apocalypse. That's a good way to look at, do I have any good skill? Does my skill translate to surviving in the zombie apocalypse? And these people definitely have those skills. They build things, they create things, they're clever, they're creative. And So I would teach people, get a skill that society wants. Now, it's great if what you want to do as a passion intersects with what society values, but a lot of times that doesn't, right? Like if you're just love, I don't know, making music, or you've got, you like building things, it might not meet the need of what society wants. And that's fine to pursue those things, but I couldn't sacrifice because I started my family so young. I didn't have years where I could go out and just kind of, follow the dream, quote unquote. And it doesn't matter if I'm not making money, because I had a kid at 22. Like I had to start making money. And, but yeah, I think if people go out and get a skill like that pays the most that you can tolerate working for that skill, establish yourself, make it so that when you take your leap of faith, you have a safety net. I think that's what people, because people go to college. Number one, go to college and realize, dude, you do not have to go to college. Like, become an electrician, become a welder, become a carpenter, become something that we actually need. We don't need another, history major or whatever.
Yeah.
And to get a skill that society cares about, and then start working your side gig, your passion. Now, ideally, you get your passion up and running and making money so you can smoothly make that exit. I was never going to be able to dedicate enough time to make a smooth exit. So I just took my exit.
Man, that whole talk right there has so much meat that I just want to dissect right now and get into, because man, first off, thank you for sharing the story about your dad and your father and how, he inspired you, and, the clock analogy. It's so powerful. And I hope my listeners really paid attention to that, because life is short and we're only here for a short time, and that clock is ticking, and we need to take advantage of all the moments in our lives. But I'll get to that later. But first off, like, talk about the fear that you had when you turned in that resignation letter.
That is funny, because you think about, you understand conceptually how it's going to be when you quit, right? That there's not a solid paycheck coming in, that you're going to have to sort of earn it yourself, but it does not sink in until you drive away. And when I drove away from that refinery, I parked my car and actually did like a little video. And the analogy, actually looking back, I was talking about this in a different podcast, but the analogy I'd come up with, do you hunt at all?
Do I did. I dabbled in some fishing. Maybe it's a funny story. I'll save it for another podcast. But I went hunting like once with some buddies of mine, and it didn't turn out too well.
Yeah, I call myself an inept hunter. I got into it later in life when I was in Texas, and I stink at hunting. Anyway, in Texas they have these things called high fenced ranches. I'm sure they're all over the world, but in Texas they have these high fenced ranches. So the game is in the ranch. It can be thousands of acres, but the game is in there. Right. So working for someone, in the corporate world is like going to hunt in a high fence ranch. You still have to work hard, but the meat is there. Right. You've got to spend your hours inside the fence, but the animal is there. So when I drove away from the high fence, I was like, there might not be a deer out here. Like, I might not have anything to feed my family. Like, I've got to know how to hunt. And if I don't, we ain't eating. There's no guarantee that animal is there anymore. And so it was a weird realization, because I stopped. They let me go earlier in the day. They didn't have me work the whole day. So I signed the papers. I left at 10, and I was like, well, what should I do? I could go. And I was like, no, I've got half a Friday left. I need to go start writing. I got no time to waste if I don't get going. And so I tried to, create as much of a structure and targets and goals as I could, because I went from a very structured environment. One, it was all about processes and procedures, to writing, which is I can do it at any hour of the day. I don't have a set schedule. I can kind of get up whenever. So I tried to make myself as disciplined as I could and give myself targets. But that's the best way to explain it, is that realization that that meat on that bone is not guaranteed anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to my buddy Bruce Pitcher. So yesterday, Bruce was a contestant on ABC's Extreme Weight Loss.
Really?
So he lost. And he's one of the only people that's kept it off. So 5 years ago, he lost 200 pounds. He's kept it off. He's doing awesome, incredible human being. He's coming out with a book in a month or two. Talks about how he was abused as a kid, and then how he just overcame all this stuff. And so I was talking to him, and we were just talking about a little bit about your passion and your desire, and basically how nothing's guaranteed when you're working for yourself.
Well, it's kind of like burn the boats, right? Like Tony Robbins always says.
Oh, yeah, that's where I was going. Is desperation is so important for productivity. Like, when there's just certain kinds of people that respond well to your back being against the wall. And when people are, necessity is the mother of all invention. And when you need something desperately, that's when a lot of people kick into high gear. And you just won't take it to the next level. You won't clip over into the next gear unless you need that. So it's this weird thing where you're like, I don't want to jump ship unless I get comfortable enough. But it's like, if you don't get uncomfortable, you will never try the things you need to be successful. You have to make yourself uncomfortable. Because the second you get comfortable, no one changes who they are or what they do if things are working for them. How it came up with my conversation with Bruce is people don't change until they hit rock bottom. They really don't. They don't make big changes until they hit rock bottom. And rock bottom's a scary thing because you can go one of two directions. You can crash and burn and stay there and have horrible things happen, or you can bounce back in the most glorious kind of ways and reinvent yourself and do things that are incredible. But you've got to make yourself uncomfortable before you try the things that really you should try, and before you can be creative and think laterally and try new things to be successful. So it's a weird thing. You think you can have you think you can have your cake and eat it too, but some people might, but for me, that's not how life's gone. To me, life's gone. You got to have the guts to kind of jump ship a bit. Now, you don't want to, sell the farm and sacrifice everything, all your safety. And, as I said, I've got 3 kids that I need to raise. I'm not going to sacrifice their happiness because dad, quote unquote, wants to follow his dream. But they wouldn't want them to hold me back either. They wouldn't want to be the reason why dad isn't happy. I mean, the best thing you can give your kids is your best self, right? So if I'm coming home from the refinery working 88, 90 hours a week and I'm miserable, I can put up with it. I have a very high tolerance for sort of corporate abuse. Just kind of shovel stuff on my shoulders. All my brothers are or have that. But it came to a point where I was like, you know what? I don't have to live like this. And I convinced myself I did. I had this motto, which actually served me very well, which is don't look down, don't look back. If you make a decision and it's a decent decision, don't keep second guessing it. Don't look down, don't look back, just plow forward. And again, I don't regret my last 10 years. I would have played them the same. They set me up. As I said, I saw the world. My dad even said, if you're going to write, don't become an English major. Do something else. Well, go see the world, meet people. That's
the point, right? Like, you have to do it. You have to get better. Like, your degree was in engineering, right? Chemical engineering.
Yep. Right.
But there are going to be some people that say, well, Mike, you're smart. You have a degree in chemical engineering. Of course, it's easy for you to write. How easy is it for you to write? I mean, personally, how was it hard? I mean, you say you went home and you wrote every night. Like, tell me that experience.
There is no shortcut to the 10,000 hours. It just doesn't exist. Now, there's different levels of competence. Like Stephen King talks about different kinds of writers. There's geniuses. There's people who are very competent. There's people who are great. I can't remember all the different levels. And his theory is you can move sort of one layer. You can't make a competent person a genius, but you can make a great person a genius and a competent person great. I don't know if I ascribe to that exactly. But my dad was not one for talent. He didn't really care for talent. He cared much more for hard work than he did for talent. Now, I was raised in sort of a literary household. As I said, my dad was a creative writing professor. My mom was an English professor as well. And I was a bit of a jack of all trades. I got really good grades in all my different classes, and I had a choice of kind of which direction I wanted to go. It's kind of a curse in some respects because you feel a bit spread too thin. You feel a bit schizophrenic. I'm passionate about too many things. And this is the thing, I'm pursuing this thing right now, and I'm in the schlepping mode, which is basically like I'm showing up, I'm doing school visits, sometimes for free. I'm not selling nearly as many books as I want to. So right now it's all about like grit, determination, and personality. Getting in front of people, doing the thing. And then my product has to be good. If my product is garbage, I don't really care how impressive of a personality or public speaker I am. It's going to crash and burn. It won't have the traction that it needs to. But yeah, it exercises very different parts of the brain. What I've been able to do though is the way I write, I tell people I write like I engineer, which is kind of odd. I problem solve. So I will purposely paint myself into a corner in my story and then use the tools that are left in that corner to come up with clever solutions to get out. And then I think it comes up with some very satisfying scenes. Now, that's something I have because I'm an engineer. But I guarantee if you are an architect or a welder or a musician or something else, you can bring whatever advantage that gives you to the table to do something else. Like an artist's book is going to be very different, and the way they write is going to be very different than how I write. And I just, it was not easy. It was extremely humbling. As I said, I wrote 7 years. It's one of these things, looking back, if I would have known how much work it would have taken up front, I don't know if I would have started. I'm glad I did, but I don't know that I would have. I heard another author. He's the guy that wrote Maze Runner. His name's James Dashner. He said the exact same thing. This guy's had movies made from his books. He's a millionaire from his books. And he said the exact same thing. He was like, if I would have known how much work it would have taken, because he published like 2 or 3 series before he got big. And it's just that hope that submitting it to this agent is going to be my big break. Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't. Well, okay, pivot, sort of reinvent yourself, move forward. And I honestly think the only purpose the only reason to have a plan in life is just so you end up with pieces to put something else back together. Like my plans never go the way they should, ever. And I just always find myself with pieces of a plan. And then I just go, okay, what can I build?
Well, you talked about, you realized that you wanted to pursue your dream. Like, how did you know this was what you wanted to pursue? Was it like, I like writing, I'll try to pursue this. I want to be a children's author. Like, how did you find this niche for yourself?
Yeah, it seems kind of odd. It's a weird jump. And when I talk to people, especially when I was working at Exxon, and I'd say, yeah, I'm writing a book, they just kind of like, what? But then people that knew me before I became an engineer, they'd ask me, so what are you going into? And I'm going into chemical engineering. They'd be like, you're doing what? Like, nah, you're way too creative for that kind of stuff. I loved creating videos and skits, and me and my brothers would go to these, we go to movies, and after the movie, we dissect it. We'd be like, yeah, you know what they should have done? They should have changed that and changed that. And I was like very passionate about, I just had this feeling inside me like, man, I could improve all these stories, or I could create. And so one day I was like, you know what, Hotshot, you think you're smart? How about you try? It was actually after I watched Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. And I was like, why aren't there more stories like this? And there's 1,000 stories like Lord of the Rings. I just wasn't very well read. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna see if I'm as smart as I think I am. And man, was that a humbling effort. But even through all the failures, and I had all these stories. I just constantly, when I go do school visits, I tell the kids, I just have my daydreaming switch, my imagination switch is just stuck at the on position. It just does not turn off. And I daydream about the same things in a boring meeting at Exxon as I did at a boring class in 3rd grade. I dream of superpowers and rescuing the prettiest girl from the clutches of some evil villain and epic quests, and it just never really turned off. And I just like, man, I've got some cool stories, but I didn't have a medium to share those stories. And, making movies, I was never going to do that. But writing is something that, even though you have a lot of people helping you, people to help you read it and edit it, it's kind of all on you. And so I was like, all right, let me see if I can do this. And then I just told myself, I'm going to try this. And if I ever feel like it's just not working, I'll stop. But it worked enough to just kind of keep me going. And I tell kids, like, you have to find what you're passionate about. And the best way to find what you're passionate about is, where does your brain go when no one tells you what to think about? When you have no one, on your free time, how are you spending your time? When no one's looking, what are you doing? That's who you are. So what are you passionate about? You can be passionate about very bad things. Your mind can constantly wander to unproductive and harmful things. But I found myself, that's where my brain kept going. That's where I was preoccupied with all this stuff. And I grew up on X-Men and Ninja Turtles and all this stuff. And I just formulated all these cool stories. And it was just such a large part of the idle time in my brain. And I just said, the best thing I could do, the most happy I could be, kind of going back to one of the things that pushed me over the edge when I wanted to quit, was like, what if I could monetize my passions? Because that's it, man. That is the highest you can attain is professionally, is if you can monetize what you're passionate about. And for some people it's easy, because I know people that were passionate about engineering and I just didn't find myself one of those people. People always talk about, you'll listen to these people who give you these, not get rich quick things, but like how to be successful. And a lot of it boils down to finding a mentor, like finding someone who already has what you have and then attaching yourself to their hip. And when I was looking inside of Exxon, I found a lot of successful people, but I didn't see anybody I wanted to be in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. When I hired on, I was like, I want to be a VP. And then I look at the vice president's lives. I'm like, no, I don't want to be that. And then I remember I went to a convention, a symposium, and I was watching, it was actually James Dasher and another guy, another fantasy author, talk about their lives and about, sharing all their stories and the feedback they got from the kids. And one guy had to go down and do his cameo for a movie. And I was like, I want everything you have professionally. I want it all. And it just started to click. And enough things, I think my dad dying just sort of triangulated all these emotions. Mm-hmm. And it was the thing that kind of pulled it all together. But oddly enough, my dad was the one that said, go out and get a degree, get a degree, see the world, work for the most solid oil and gas company that this world has ever produced, and don't take risks. And he had the same job for 54 years. He was born in 1929, so he was born in the Great Depression. You needed to get a job and hold on to a job for 54 years. That's what you did. And oddly enough, when my dad passed, I kind of felt like his advice got me to the point where I'm at today, which I was infinitely thankful for. But it also kind of let me go, all right, what's the next chapter?
So do you think, like, people always say to me, like, the entrepreneur minds, they're like, that are kind of like teetering on that fence of making that leap of faith. They're like, well, I have this sure thing. I'm not sure about that the grass is greener on the other side kind of deal. And it's like, I don't know the right answer. All I know is that you have to fulfill yourself. Like, whatever fulfills you, you have to do. And people are like, right. Why are you being so selfish? Why are you trying to make it about you? And it's like, well, you can't be the best father. You can't be the best husband if you're not happy inside. And
absolutely.
And if you're going to work every day and you are just miserable and you are just punching that clock and being somewhere for 8 hours and you come home and it affects your family life, like, get out. Like, you have to do something that fulfills you. And not everybody has that entrepreneur mind. It seems like you have a very diverse background. Do you think you were born with it, or is it something that kind of, was it something that came along the way? Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. I wanted to take a minute and thank today's sponsor. After that, I promise we'll get back after it. But here at Your Spirit Yourself podcast, I hand select the sponsors that come on the show because I think that they have incredible value that they can offer to you through this show. So today's sponsor is Raise Your Game by Alan Stein Jr. Anyone that pre-orders a book and wants to give it as a gift for the holidays, Alan will handwrite a letter that they can actually give as the gift and let them know it will be well worth the wait since the book won't arrive until January. Raise Your Game by Alan Stein will be available January 8th on Amazon. Pre-order now for your holiday gifts. Now back to the show.
I don't know. I think I've had all these warring interests inside my head for a very long time. And I think some people's curse, you talk about like, oh, should I quit? I'm miserable with what I'm doing. The reason why I think it's hard to give advice is I don't know where that misery comes from. Now, if you're miserable just because you don't know how to work hard, you leaving your job is not going to help. If you're miserable because you know what you want to do and you can't do it, that's a different kind of miserable. So I talked to my brother, the psychologist, and he, we'll be talking. He's, I'm not happy with what I'm doing right now. And then he tells me, but I don't know what else I'd be doing. Whereas I knew exactly what I wanted my life to be like. Like, I would talk to these guys. I remember being it was down in Australia. It was during one of our early morning meetings, and my project manager just kind of, BSing a bit. And he's like, do you guys ever think about retirement? And I was the only guy in the room that was under the age of 40. And he all went around and like, nah, I don't really, not really. And it came to me and I was like, I think about it every day. Like, I know exactly what I would want to do. I know my life. I want to have conversations like this. If I was working in a refinery in a turnaround right now, working 13 hours a day, I would never be having this conversation with you. And I would never, I would never be out speaking to kids, things that I'm passionate about. And I was like, my passion drug my day job along, sort of in spite of my day job. And I was like, but what if I could do for a living? What if I could monetize my passion? So my passion is feeding my drive is feeding my passion. And I was like, wouldn't that just be an awesome way to live? And I just got thinking into some of these cliches, like you really do only have one life. And every second that ticks away, you will not get back. And I mean, my dad had 3 independent forms of cancer. Other than that, he was a very healthy guy. He worked full time till he was, in his 80s. But there's no saying I don't get that next year. And then it's done. Like I'm going to be happy once I retire. Because I tell people I walked away from $10 million. That's what I walked away from. I did the math. Exxon's got a calculator. They give you a huge retirement. You put money into 401k. I walked away from $10 million over the next 25 years. But so what, man?
Let me ask you this, and I don't mean to cut you off, but like, what were the voices telling you when you decided to quit? What were your friends saying? What were your family saying? Was there support, or was it kind of like, was there negativity?
No. So that's one blessing that I have. So my wife, she was the one that was like, Mike, you can't keep doing this. Like, you are miserable. You're missing holidays. I tried to insulate myself, my kids from it as much as I could. So even when I was working crazy hours, I would still try to be home, for dinner. And then right when they went to bed, I would go back to work or something like that, But I had this drive that I wanted to write the book. So she was saying, you've got to quit. You cannot keep doing what you're doing. You're killing yourself. You're getting 5 hours of sleep every night. And she was right. Now, it's really easy for your friends to go, dude, follow the dream. Kill it, man. You're going to go after it. You're going to do great. Because if I don't, what's the downs? My family was the one that was more like, when I say my family, I mean like my siblings. They're like, are you sure you've thought through this? Make sure you've got a really good thing going. Slow down. Because it's really, especially if it's a friend I hadn't seen in a while, or I just, I only know through text now because we don't live next to each other. It's really easy for them to go, dude, follow your dream, which is great because you need that. But it's those voices of like people that are really close to you, like your siblings and your parents, and maybe you got, a friend that's that close that's like, have you thought this through? And it was actually my brother, the psychologist. He's great to have. My torment probably forced him into being a psychologist, but now I'm reaping the benefits because he gets to sort of pour back onto me. It was funny. He used a lot of the same language that we use in the engineering world and in the construction world. And he was like, okay, so you quit. What's the worst thing that could go wrong? I was like, well, the worst thing that could go wrong is it doesn't take off. I've kind of put the cart before the horse. This thing's not earning me money enough to be self-sufficient, and I've got to go back. He's like, okay, is that gonna destroy you? I was like, no. He's like, what's the upside? I was like, well, the upside is if it works, I'm living every man's dream. Not necessarily writing books, but I'm monetizing my passion, right? That's what everyone wants in some respects. And he goes, that is a ginormous upside. And the downside is what? You got to move to Houston? Like, that's not that big of a downside, man. He's like, what are you waiting for? And I was like, well, that's a pretty good point. And I thought through a lot of different ways. I thought, like, could I move right now and just get away from the refinery world and take a job with fewer hours? Is there another job in Billings? Because I live in Billings, Montana right now. Is there another job in Billings that I could do that's less money and fewer hours that would still allow me to do my thing on the side? And I thought through all those different ones, and I was like, the time for prudence is gone. I was like, I'm just going to jump ship and do this. I honestly think I can do it because where I saw a lot of writers fail, and I would go to these symposiums and they talk about like, top 10 things that every writer should have to worry about. And it's like being disciplined and staying away from, and I was like, I have got that so down. Like, you don't realize where I'm coming from an extremely competitive corporate world that is ExxonMobil. And I've been able to perform well and bounce back from a lot. And I was like, man, I have a leg up. Now, I haven't been writing my entire life, but I'm an opinion of I ascribe to the opinion of Gary Vee when he says triple down on your strengths. Like, I'm aware of my weaknesses. At least I think I am. I'm aware of some of them. And I should know what they are. And I should go, all right, this thing is going to bite me every once in a while. But no one's going to pay me for being kind of good at a lot of things. People pay you because of what you do well. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna not worry about the fact that I haven't been writing for 20 years and I don't have an English degree, but I can tell a different kind of story. And I can tell a unique story, and I can problem solve extremely well. So I'm going to paint myself into some pretty tight corners in these stories, and I'm going to problem solve my way out of them in really cool ways. And so that's what I tried to do. I tried to not worry about, I tried to be aware of my weaknesses, to just know when they bite me, I go, yep, it was time. You know, I got to live with that.
What's your biggest weakness?
From a writing perspective,
Sure.
it's just my prose. I just haven't put the hours in to have, you know, a dynamic prose. It's not beautiful writing. I think my dialogue is very good. And I think part of it has come from living with real people from all over the world. Mm-hmm. And I draw so many of those conversations. You know, you're in the construction trailer with your inspectors or your welders or your, you know, maintenance planners. And they're just some of the funniest people you've ever met in your life. And they're real,
they are
unguarded people. They tell you what they think. And in today's world, that is a disappearing quality.
Like, I think some of them could literally be stand-up comics, or
no doubt,
at least write for some kind of comedy stand-up. Because, I mean, when I go into a room full of my coworkers, I literally, seriously piss my pants. Like, it is just, you know, an onslaught of just teasing and picking and nitpicking, and just kind of, you know, there are seriously years and years of pictures on a wall of just like making fun of each other. And the blue collar world, I love to death. And there is some unhidden, I mean, not unhidden, but hidden talent that, I mean, some of these guys could do anything they want. They could start their own businesses. They could do whatever. They have these skills, these trades that, I mean, if they really wanted to, they could own an industry.
Dude, if there's one thing I could tell the blue collar world is, like, there's so many people. Like, I had an inspector in Australia, and the only reason why he wasn't an engineer is because he just didn't grow up doing that, right? He grew up kind of welding in his garage, and he became a welding inspector. That guy was so smart. He could do whatever he wants. And it's like, these people are creative. Like, you look at some of these welders, like the stuff they can come up with and the talent. Like, welding is such a weird thing. It's this cross between being artistic. It's like painting, you know, but knowing a lot about how to make the weld work and inclusions and your amperage and all this stuff. And it's this cross between a science and an art. And you see people that are, I like people who are competent at what they do. And I found so many of them in the trades. Now, there's obviously incompetent tradesmen, but the people that I surrounded myself with and that Exxon surrounded me with were people who were competent. So maybe I was blessed in that regard. But man, they can, like, I don't know. I just feel like if you don't get exposed to stuff, you don't think certain things are possible. Like, when I was at Exxon, when I first hired on, it wasn't like a matter of if you were going overseas. It was just like when. Now, my mom still lives in the same house that I was born and raised in, right? I did not get raised in a family that, you know, traveled and saw the world. And so when you get an Exxon, I was like, this is going to be weird. Are we going to live in Indonesia? Are we going to live, you know? And then you just surround yourself with those people long enough. And then eventually you start asking yourself, like, oh, where am I going? When am I going? And, you know, I could see people that, you know, maybe they're from a small town and it's a welding town and their dad was a welder and their grandpa was a welder. So that's what they did. And they just aren't surrounded with enough people that go, do you realize you could do a lot of other stuff? And so they never ask themselves the question, or they don't have people that show them the way. But man, are they capable. So it's tough because it requires a lot of extra time and effort to connect with people like that and to maybe realize that's something you want to do. But if there's any amount of disquiet inside yourself, where that it's preoccupying, that you cannot focus on your day job and you're in the blue, like, I don't know, it's tough. But you got to start looking. And, you know, with the internet, and it's just so easy to reach out to people nowadays. But I think the best thing you can do is try to find someone who is doing what you want to do and attach yourself to their hip as much as you can. And just try to find out how they do it, what their secrets are.
No, I agree with you 100%. I didn't have a mentor growing up. I was a small county in Delaware. It was like you're exactly right. You grew up, you do what your parents did because you're familiar with that, and you grew up in this bubble. You don't know anything outside of that. And luckily, I was able to get outside of that bubble and experience a whole different world. But for a lot of my friends that are back home, they're still there, and it's like they are just so talented, and they're so gifted in so many different ways. It's kind of like the mentor thing is so huge. Who has helped you along the way with the book, like being an author, getting it published? Like, who has been your mentor?
So that's an interesting one, because I was reading this book on creativity and talked about all the creative geniuses and super successful creative people have 4 roles in their life. And I can't remember all of them. One was like a prominent promoter. One was a modern muse, someone that like inspires you. One was like friendly competition. I can't remember what the 4th one was. Anyway, it's interesting. You kind of walk through, you're like, all right, do I have those kind of people in my life, or do I not have those kind of people in my life? So my story is a bit different, because a lot of it I started kind of on my own. Now, my dad would give me things and help me, but he kind of, he was kind of stayed at arm's reach. He's like, you should read this book. You should do this. He read a little bit of my stuff. So did my mom. But you kind of, it's weird. It's like, you don't mix family and writing in some respects. My mom she's very honest with me. And, she said, oh, you always overwrite. You always overwrite. You do this, you do that. And she's completely right. She's right every time. And so a lot of it was, I just tried to soak up things, differently. So I had another really big moment in my life was I had back surgery. So I was kind of a jock in high school, loved football. Football was my life. And, in my adulthood, I loved playing flag football and doing other sports. And then I injured my back. Then I injured it again and blew my disc out lifting up a barbecue. It's not like a sexy story. And then the pain was intense, extremely acute for a very long time. Had to get back surgery. And I just couldn't get back to doing what I wanted to do. And so that was one of the hardest things I ever went through, was realizing there's just things in my life I'm going to have to give up if I want to live without pain. And that took a long time to do that. But there was something that I could replace it with. And the 2 things I replaced it with actually were hunting and writing. Because I didn't need, you can be overweight and hunt. You just got to sit in a stand somewhere. And
you just can't smell like cheeseburgers, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to watch that. And I haven't done any crazy hunts where I've had to haul some elk out of the backwoods yet. But writing, it was almost like there was this, I say that there's this, in some corner of my soul, there was this pale, sickly version of myself, this nerd version who'd been neglected since my youth. And he came out and was like, I don't need a good back. You can give me center stage. And so I kind of gave the nerd self center stage for quite a while now. And so one of the things I did, I had injured my back. I got back surgery, and I was out for a week, right? I had to be on my back on bed, kind of on bed rest. And there's an author, really famous science fiction and fantasy author named Brandon Sanderson. And he actually teaches a class at BYU called How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy. And he posts all of his lectures online. He records them and puts them on YouTube. So I watched his entire semester while I was on my back in bed, kind of recovering. And then I started to write, and I got a little bit of feedback. And then I was like, well, I got to start making friends that are writers. So the week before I moved down to Australia, again, Brandon Sanderson and a couple other authors put on this, their first ever, now they've done, I think, 5 or 6, their first ever sort of writing retreat. It was in Tennessee. So I flew out there. I went to this week-long thing in Tennessee, and I met a bunch of other writers. And then I went down to Australia, which stunk because I was isolated from all these people I just met. In some respects, isolated. You can always stay in touch with them online. But I didn't have that community, but I kept writing, and then I kept getting my things, I got it professionally edited. I got a beta read, which is basically just people reading your manuscript and giving you feedback. So I tried to invite as much feedback as possible from people that you trust, because you kind of bare your soul when you write. And if you can't take criticism, it's probably not the direction you want to go, because a lot of it's it feels like they're attacking you because you've, poured your heart and soul out on the paper. And then when they critique the words, it feels like they're critiquing your heartstrings. And I tried to invite as much of that as I could. And then when I came back to Billings, to America, I tried to attend. There's a symposium in Provo, Utah that's fantastic for professionals, science fiction and fantasy authors. So I've been to that twice. I'm actually going to try to present at it this year. I want to be one of the panelists. So again, I just tried to surround myself with as many people as I could, because I didn't have like a teacher, a formal teacher, right, in college that I could look to. So a lot of it was just through practice and then reaching out and trying to expand my community as much as I could, just to get to know other authors, other people in my shoes, people who have already made it, and to seek advice from them. I've written different authors throughout the years and sought advice from them, and they've given me some fantastic advice. And sometimes it's just a paragraph. It's like, you know what? You're not quite there yet. You need to kind of change this. And okay. And you kind of go back and retool yourself. And I remember one guy who's wildly successful now, but I had read his first book when he wasn't that successful. And I'd emailed him like, dude, I loved your first book. So we had kind of got this relationship. We'd email back and forth. And he finally took a look at some of my stuff. And he's like, look, you're talented. He said the same thing my mom said. I overwrite. So you write too much, you make, you gotta trim it down. And he said, if you're stubborn enough, you'll get there. Like, that's what it's going to boil down to. And he said that in like 2014. And not that his word is gospel, but I was like, all right, this is a guy who's made it, who's got a, opinion I should trust, or at least value. And I am that stubborn. That's one of the things I have, is like, one of the biggest downfalls of new authors is they'll write something once, they'll look at what's published, and they go, oh, I'll never get there. It's like, yeah, that's your first draft, man. Mm-hmm. What you're seeing on the shelves is 5 drafts. It's got a professional editor on it. Cut yourself some slack. So I had this, maybe it was from studying in chemical engineering and kind of buckling down, but I just sat there and revised the same book again and again and again, and polished it until it started to kind of look like what I was seeing on the shelves. Whereas I think what most people do is they just write a first draft. It's garbage. Start another draft. And there is some value in doing that. But man, there's also value in refining, sticking with something that is good, and refining it. And I think that's an advantage that I have. And I assume it's from my chemical engineering upbringing, that you just stick to it. You just make it work. There's just, when I was talking to Bruce yesterday, Bruce Pitcher, he was saying there's this difference between motivation and drive. Motivation is sort of doesn't last. You get it when you like watch a cool, compilation of quotes with some cool music behind it on YouTube, and then it kind of fizzles out the second you hit adversity. But people that have drive, it like burns within you. And like when adversity comes, it's just like, okay, how can I pivot? How can I work through it? And you make excuses to do it. I tell my kids this all the time, like, hey, go do this. And then they'll start making an excuse to not do it. And I was like, well, you don't want to do it then, because you're making an excuse to not do it. So you're showing your hand. You're showing me what you want to do, which is not the thing I'm asking you to do. But what are you making excuses to do? Are you am I breaking away from something early so I can go write? And if I'm not doing that, then I need to look at like, do I really want to write, or do I want to do something else? People are enamored with the idea of things, but not the work that goes into them.
I agree.
So
100%.
I think that's what the blue collar workers have such an advantage over, is a lot of them do like work because they grew up working. They worked with their dad or their grandpa, or they worked on a farm, or they worked in a garage somewhere, and they just grew up working. They just like to work. They like to create. They like to look at something that's broken and then see that it's fixed and know that I made the difference. If I wasn't here, it would still be broken. I was the one thing that created something that works. And man, if you like working, you just have to direct yourself, kind of orient yourself in the right direction to start working on your passion. Because like, if you got your head screwed on straight and you work hard, are you really going to fail in America? You might not be a millionaire, but you're not going to fail.
I just want to point out real quick, like you're talking about emotion and inspiration. Like when you get motivated, that is an emotion. Like it's going to die out, just like being happy or sad. It is the discipline, the everyday discipline that's going to keep you on your path. You have to come up with something. You have to put something in daily, a daily practice that's going to keep you on your map to success. It's not the motivation, because that's just an emotion. It is your daily disciplines.
Right.
And I want to know, my son's going to kill me if I don't ask you this question. I asked him before bedtime when he was writing in his comic book. He wants to know, how did you come up with the idea of the epic adventures of the Techno Wizard? Because that is something that he struggles with, because he can't really, like, he's very young. He's obviously 8, but tapping into his creativity, he wants to know, like, how do you do that?
Yeah. So to me, creativity, and this is what I tell kids at school, creativity is the fusion of logic and imagination. So imagination is just thinking of stuff, right? It's just thinking of cool things. They don't necessarily have to work, but they're just cool. They're set pieces. They're cool ideas. They're cool creatures. They're cool powers. And then logic is trying to make it work. That's where kind of the engineering portion of myself kicks into gear. And, I think how you become creative is by feeding your curiosity. And I tell kids, you can do one of 3 things with your spare time. You can entertain yourself, which is important to some degree. It's like a candy, right? It's good while it lasts, but the second it's over, it has no lasting value. So I tell kids, when you go home, what do you do when no one's telling you what to do? Are you entertaining yourself, or are you learning? That's another thing you can do. And never in the history of the world have we had a better opportunity to learn than right now. You don't even have to spell to look stuff up anymore. You can just speak it. You can look up anything. If you want to be an engineer, if you want to learn how to shoot a free throw, if you want to learn how to charge a car battery, like, you used to be out of luck. Like 15 years ago, you used to be out of luck if you didn't know how to do these things. And now you just look them up. And then the third thing you can do is create. And that is willing something into existence that wasn't here before. This putting the learning into practice in creating something. So I tell kids, if you're not creating, it's hard to be creative. And so part of it's just like, sit down and create a story. And once you know the formula, once you know story structure, creating stories, like the mystique of creating stories goes away. To some respects, there's something magical about creating a story, but it's not a mysterious process anymore. And it's basically like your protagonist, your main character, and they need to want something. If your main character doesn't want something, you don't have a story. Your antagonist is the person that prevents your main character from getting what they want. It's most of the time it's your bad guy, but it's not always. Like, have you seen The Dark Knight?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So protagonist, your main guy, is Batman. Then your antagonist, most people go, oh, it's the Joker. Wrong. Because what does Batman want in The Dark Knight? He wants to retire. He's arthritic. He's beaten up. He wants to hang up the cowl. Who prevents him from retiring? It's Harvey Dent. Because Harvey Dent won't step up and be the White Knight. He won't step up and be the hero that Gotham needs. So Batman can't retire, not because of what Joker's doing, but because of what Harvey Dent is doing. And so it's this, once you understand, like, that's why it's not always hero villain. A lot of times it is. Toy Story is another example. Woody wants to be Andy's favorite toy. And who prevents him from being Andy's favorite toy? Buzz. But Buzz isn't a bad guy, but he's just someone that prevents it. So once you say, okay, I can't create a story, come up with a character, make them want something really bad, then have somebody prevent that from happening. And then you need to introduce conflict. And I teach this thing to kids about the flow of story structure. I have this thing called a 7-point plot structure that a lot of other authors use, and it goes through certain moments in stories. And I've actually gone through, like, I went and watched Thor Ragnarok, and I watched Black Panther, and I paused the movie at the exact moment when these parts of the story were happening, and I plotted it on a chart. And, like, the thing that's supposed to happen at the midpoint happens at the midpoint almost to the second in the movie. Like, people who understand and tell stories for a living know these things because they want to take you on a certain emotional roller coaster. And we've just found, after thousands and thousands and thousands of years of just telling stories, that human beings respond to certain dips and rises in this roller coaster. And so a lot of it has to do with conflict. A lot of it has to do with your hero switching from being reactive to proactive at the midpoint. Then 2/3 of the way through the story, all is going to be lost. You're going to lose everything and feel like you're further away from your goal as possible. And you're going to have this crazy rise to the climax at the end of the show, at the end of the story, and you're going to feel awesome because you accomplished something. But the idea for the Techno Wizard was funny because I love portal fantasy. So portal fantasy is where you have someone go through, like Chronicles of Narnia. You go through some portal and you can't go back home. But every single one of those books that I saw, every time they come back home, they can't convince anybody of where they went. They just have to kind of keep it to themselves. So I was like, and I also had this idea, like if we went back in time and talked to like Da Vinci and told him what we have today, how would that conversation go? Like we have this magical box that everyone carries around in their pants, and we can look up the answer to anything, and we can instantly communicate with anyone in the world. Da Vinci would be like, oh, so you guys are all like super geniuses? No, we kind of just use it to look up naked pictures of people and take pictures of our food, And so I was like, what would happen if a kid got transported to another world, but he maintained his cell phone signal back to Earth, and he could post about all of his adventures on Facebook and social media and YouTube, and he could live stream his final battle, and he would become the most famous kid in the world, but he wouldn't even be in the world. And then if he brought over a bunch of technology, what would the people think of that technology? They would think he's a wizard. He has a drone, this magical bird that can see things. He has this phone, which is like an oracle that can answer any question he asks it. So I had to kind of engineer, okay, he's going to bring that technology over there. How is it still powered? What's the rules of it maintaining cell phone signal back to Earth? So I just started problem solving my way through all these things. It was like, oh, geez, that doesn't make sense. Well, how can I get an answer to that? And then I would kind of develop something, and I would run into another problem, and then you kind of come up with another solution. And then eventually you create a fictional universe that has its own magic system, that has its own rules that it operates by, and its own characters and its own conflicts. And whenever you put conscientious people in conflict, you get a cool story.
How did you charge his phone?
So what I did is I put it slightly in the future. So it's in 2032 when the kid gets transported over, and he's got everything solar powered.
Little Elon Musk.
Yeah. In fact, when I originally wrote the book, his cell phone was called the Tesla Apollo. I didn't want to get sued, so I had to change the name to I made up a company. But yeah, originally it was called the Tesla because I was like, dude, this is solar powered.
That is awesome.
Yeah, so you think through little things and you try to come up with clever solutions, and sometimes you surprise yourself. It's I talked to a lot of people that wrote stories, and they say it's like uncovering dinosaur bones. It's like the story already exists somewhere, and you're just discovering it. It is a weird sensation as you work your way through a story, and things start to connect that were completely, disparate, and you're like, how do these things? And all of a sudden they start clicking together, and you're like, it's almost like it just was here before me. And I just was lucky enough to discover it. It's a weird thing, but it's so cool and it's so satisfying because that's what I try to tell kids is to create something is the way we will be judged at when we leave this world. Like my dad's gone now. So what do we remember about my dad? We remember about the jokes he made, his kids, he created us, the books that he wrote, his creations that he left behind, the memories he made with people. So it's the things that you create that you're kind of judged on. If you go through this life just entertaining yourself, at the end of this life, you're going to have nothing to show for it. And that scared me a little bit because I was like, I want a way to sort of immortalize myself. And you do it through your kids, but you also do it through it's how you leave your mark on the world. It's by what you create, whether it's a cabinet or whether it's a child or whether it's a book. That's what you offer to the world is what you're able to create. And I think some people don't realize, they kind of follow. No, I don't think everyone's got that entrepreneurial spirit. Not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur, nor should they be. I think they just kind of follow what other people tell them to do and don't realize they can create different things that are uniquely their own.
Well, going back to your dad, like where you're at today and where you were a year ago, like if he was here right now or you could have a cell phone and talk to him, like what would that conversation sound like?
That would be very interesting, actually, because it's this weird duality of I'm able to do what I can do now. I think it would have stressed my dad out. I always tell people, like, if my dad would have realized if my dad would have known I jumped ship, I probably would have put him in an early grave if the cancer hadn't done it, which is a bit morbid to say, but it's kind of true. Like, he was so worried. His one main worry was, like, does everybody have a job? And again, this is a guy who was born and raised in the Great Depression. So my brother, my psychologist brother, he was the last of us to kind of nail his job because he was, went to a lot more schooling than I did as an engineer. And when he finally landed his job, he actually went to the Air Force for 4 years. my dad was so relieved. And, that everyone is provided for and everyone is taken care of. I think I could have had the conversation with him because he knew that I was very passionate about writing. And ultimately, he just wants us to be happy, and that being provided for as sort of a very traditional household is the male's responsibility. And that's what I was stepping up the plate to do, is to provide for the family and protect the family. And
so let me ask you this, and and I'm going to go a little deep here. So when he was still here, you were in your 9-to-5 or your corporate job.
My 6 to 6.
Yeah, your 6 to 6, or your 24/7. And then when he left, you followed your dream. You think that there's a reason for that? Do you think that if you would never done this if he was still here?
It's one of those things that I was sure I was going to do it in October, and I didn't pull the trigger for almost 10 more months. Just because I got back into the swing of things, and I'm like, well, maybe I can make it work. And it's weird how routine sort of just numbs your brain a bit. Routine can be extremely important to be productive, but can also blind you to certain things. I think I didn't start asking myself the right questions until he left. So similar to how conceptually I knew how it was going to be when I left Exxon, I didn't understand. I didn't internalize how it was until I'd walked out the gate. It's similar. Like, I had always thought about one day I would like to quit and write books for a living, but I'd always convinced myself I'm going to do it much more prudently. I'm going to make sure that I got tons of books out. It might take me 5 years to get 2 books out, but I'm going to take the time. I'm going to, do it prudently. I'm going to kind of slowly step through the process, so I'm not doing any undue risk to the family. And I don't know. It was this weird. It was like this, as I said, it was a weird magical epiphany. It's like my context of my life just changed. I really started asking myself those questions like, dude, your dad, again, just had another different form of cancer. Like, yeah, he was in his 80s, but he could, what's to say he couldn't have got it earlier? And then I looked around and I'd see all these people who were so, not that everyone, in my work was unhappy, but there were a lot of people were. And they were all clamoring. Like, we talk about it. I talk about it with everybody. I would love to do something different. I would love to follow my passions. And then one day came and I was like, I've always done things a bit differently. I'm a different kind of engineer at Exxon, for sure. And I just said, I could be that guy. Like, how cool would it be to be the guy that everyone always talks about being? Like, what a cool way to live your life. Like, I have these weird things that I want to do. I want to build a hobbit hole. And
what the hell is a hobbit hole?
Well, dude, have you look up Hobbiton, and it's where they filmed Lord of the Rings, where where all the hobbits live in. It's like a big round door. It's this house under a hill and stuff.
Yeah.
So I started looking it up. There's a bunch of people who have done it in the States. I'm going to interview a lady who's done it. She built one and I actually saw it on Zillow, had an ad for it. Anyway, it's a way cool thing. I've always wanted to do it. And we went to Hobbiton. We went to New Zealand when we lived in Australia, and it was just crazy inspiring. It's my happy place I go to when I get too stressed is Hobbiton. And I was like, how cool would it be to be the guy that built that?
Yeah.
I was like, it's a weird thing, but I was like, what an awesome way to leave your mark in the world. Like, I try to do it in little ways. Like, there's a couple of pictures on my website. I was walking up to my front door. This was a year and a half ago, and we had 2 sandstone blocks there. And I just turned to my wife. I was like, Jill, you know what that sandstone block needs? She's like, oh boy, what? And I was like, it needs Excalibur. It needs a sword. She's like, okay. My wife is so awesome. She lets us get away. She lets me get away with all sorts of crazy ideas. And I didn't know how to do it. So I kind of looked it up online. There wasn't really anyone that told me how to do it. So I rented this huge old drill and took a 14-inch deep, 2-inch wide core out of the center of this sandstone block and then cemented in a sword that I bought. So walking up to my front door, there's an Excalibur sitting right to the right of my walkway.
That is awesome.
And people were like, so why did you do that? And I was like, exactly what you said, because it's awesome. I don't need any other excuse. Somewhere along the lines, we forget that we should pursue awesomeness.
Yeah.
Awesomeness trumps everything for me. It trumps everything in life. It trumps everything in stories. If something is awesome, do it, man. It'll ruin your resale value. Why do I care about the next family to live in my house? I'm living in my house now. I'm going to make my house cool. And what a better way to live is to surround yourself with awesomeness.
That is great. So, Mike, real quick before we wrap it up, I want to say, first off, how do people connect with you?
I am very easy to get a hold of. So I try to have a pretty good presence online. So my personal website is mike-thayer.com. So I did some blogging before. I actually had a blog post like 2 or 3 years ago go crazy viral. It was just kind of in Utah, which was odd. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with my writing today because I write children's fantasy books now. But you can go to mike-thayer.com. That's sort of like my general site. Then I have the technowizardbooks.com, which is the site for my book. And there's ways to contact me there. But I'm also on YouTube, Thaydawg, Thaydawg. That was what they called me in high school, and it stuck.
What's weird is that they called me Trey Dog in high school too.
There you go. It's something with the T's and the dogs, man. It just works and it just sticks. But I'm on Facebook, Mike Thayer author. Look me up there. But I'm on Instagram, and very easy to get a hold of. I love connecting with other people that are passionate about storytelling and honestly anything in life. If you're an interesting guy and you're passionate, I kind of want to talk to you, guy or gal. And I love stuff like this, man. It's one of the things I wanted to do. I just wanted to connect. I realized how much I enjoyed people as I traveled around the world, whether they were Australian, whether they were, I know I met a lot of people from India. I lived in Italy for 2 years on a mission for my church, and people are very different. And I just like talking to people. I just like to hear what they kind of have to say. I realize they think very differently from me. But I want to hear people's unfiltered opinions. I don't want to hear, I want to hear what they really think. And so, but again, I'm really easy to get a hold of. You just hit me up on any of my websites, anything on social media, and I'll respond back. And then you can see, and I can try to cross post a bunch so you can kind of always see what I'm coming out with.
Sure. So to end it, I usually have I want you to give me like a pep talk speech, like fire me up inside. So I am a blue collar entrepreneur. And I am the listener. I want you to talk to me right now, talk to the listeners that are listening and say, fire me up. I am thinking about leaving my job. I have this passion. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know what to do. I need Mike to fire me up right now.
Yeah, I would say, however cliche it is to say, you've got to think, if you don't jump ship, I will kind of take you through the same thought pattern my brother did. If you don't jump ship, how is your life going to be? In 40 years from now, looking back, are you going to regret it? Because you honestly, again, it's cliche, but you got one shot at this. You have one shot at life. And when you're 70 and you're 80 and you're not able to do the things that you wish you would have tried to do, you are going to regret it. And have a contingency plan. Don't be crazy. Don't be irresponsible, but think, what's the upside if I jump ship right now? The upside is that I put my passion and my hard work into it, and I make this work, and I achieve what very few people in the history of the world have been able to do, which is pursue your passion on a daily basis and to get rewarded for it and compensated for it. That's the upside. Now, what's the downside? You got to adjust. You got to move. You got to get rehired back on. Now, if you have a skill that's worthwhile, that's not going to be that hard. Yeah, you might need to move or whatever, but that's part of life. You'll see a new part of the country at worst. That's not that bad of a downside. So if you've gone through that and you've kind of done that math and done that formula, go for it. Because again, I tell kids this all the time. All good stories are based in conflict. And what that means is when there's conflict in your life, eventually it's going to become a really cool story. So if you jump ship and it doesn't work, what's the worst that could happen? You got an awesome story to tell in 5 years. So I would say if you've done that math, if you've done that equation in your head, and the upside truly is to achieve something that very few people get to achieve, and that you can live your passion on a daily basis, go for it. By all means. And surround yourself with people who are awesome. Surround yourself with things that are awesome, but people that support you. And if you don't have people to support you in your life, you might need to change who you surround yourself with. Again, you got one shot at this life. Go for happiness, go for joy, go for fulfillment. And like, again, what's the downside? Downside is you might have to adapt. That's what human beings do. That's what smart people do. That's what hardworking people do. And you can do that. It was crazy. You just could not have convinced me beforehand that you should. You just didn't do that. You went and you worked for 35 years and you got your retirement and you made your money, and that's how you live life. And yes, that is a way to live life. And I probably would have been happy living that life. But the joy that I have right now, the fulfillment that I'm able to obtain, dude, second to none.
I love it. His name is Mike Thayer. He is the author of The Epic Adventures of the Techno Wizard. Check out his book. Mike, thank you for joining the show.
Thanks, Trey, man. I had a blast.
I want to say thank you to Mike Thayer for hanging out with us today. Thank you so much for dropping value bombs on us. I really do appreciate all the stories that you shared and all the advice to make us our superior selves. So thank you, Mike, for hanging out. I want to say thank you to you, the listener, for downloading and hanging out. Please leave a rating and review wherever you get your downloads, and please follow me on Facebook or Instagram at tdowns80 or Twitter at downstrey. I want to say thank you guys so much for listening. I really do love you guys. Please, please, please follow us on social media, and please leave a rating and review wherever you get your downloads. Thank you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later.